I want to introduce Scott Brewster. He's an Office 365 subject matter expert at Leidos, and he also leads the DC SharePoint User Group, which is how I got to know him, and I met him a couple times online. So Scott, I want to thank you for joining me today.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
So for those who haven't met you or heard about you, talk about a bit about where you're from, who you are, and what you do.
I do everything Microsoft 365. Primarily, I've had government clients for the last several years because I was in the intelligence community for a minute, or a little more than a minute, when I got out of the Army. So I've supported a number of intelligence agencies and Army functions since I got out in January of 07. And yeah, so I'm in Maryland now, just south of Baltimore. I'm happy with where I am because I'm no longer supporting the intel community. So it's nice.
It's a hard grind, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's not that it's hard. It's I got very tired of the bureaucracy, and you know, it had played out, and I don't see the wages being dramatically different any longer for having the clearance versus not having the clearance, because the market rates out in the civilian sector have just gone up so much that going through all the mess to be within government bureaucracy doesn't pay off anymore.
That's going to be a challenge in the long term for government. They're going to have to figure that out for sure.
Very much. They'll have to start raising rates. And this is why I had a friend reach out a couple weeks back asking for some folks if I knew anybody. He was looking for 6 cleared people with TSs. And that ended up, he was offering very high, 190 plus for 6 individuals. That's a lot.
That is a lot. So, so you were in the Army. Talk about that bit. I mean, what got you to go in the Army?
Sad story, especially considering today, I found out that my late best friend's father died today. But whenever I was in college, my best friend said, "Hey man, come join the Guard with me." And I'm like, "But dude, they're morons." And he's like, "No, we just have fun on the weekends. They'll help pay for school and this, that, and the other thing." And I'm like, "I'll talk to your recruiter." So between classes one day, I went to the Army recruiting office, but it was for the active duty guy. And I was by leave, and Sergeant John J. Poole, I remember his name very clearly, said, "Wait, what do you want to do with the rest of your life?" And I said, "I want to work for a triple letter agency." And he said, "I'll give you clearance." And I was like, I can do that. So instead of, I gave up my scholarship and I was like, fine, screw it. I'll go join the Army. And I went all around the world. I have no regrets going in. Met my wife. There's no way I would have my wife and kid. I probably would have never ended up doing this for a living had I not gone on that path. So it's not a bad thing. No regrets getting out when I did. The Army said Fort Drum or get out. And I was here at Fort Meade. And my wife teaches for an agency here at Fort Meade. And so it was like, I don't find a good reason to sacrifice her career for mine when she's making more than me at the moment. So I decided to get out. Now I found out I was much better at my hobby than a lot of people were professionally. So I got offered positions to do IT.
Oh, interesting. So IT, so you were doing Intel in the military and then IT as a hobby?
You could say that. I got my first computer at the age of 5, Commodore VIC-20. My mom thought computers would be good for my future. And it was, but I always thought, computer would be something that I would use in my job, not necessarily be my job. And so it didn't turn out to be a bad thing at all. It was just, I got into the hacking world at a very young age, and I still get involved in a lot of hacker type things. And I go to hacker conferences often. I was friends with some big name people who have long since died now. I don't want to get into all that, but yeah, so I was really into it because of the hacking aspect. Stayed away from that while I was in the Army and had my clearance. And whenever I was at the Office of Director of National Intelligence, my first job out of the Army, I was sitting next to the guy who had put handcuffs on someone very famous. And he's like, yeah, you can get back into that world, just don't do anything illegal. Awesome. So I started to a little bit, and then someone brought my former employer, Dan Solutions, brought SharePoint into the Office of Director of National Intelligence. And my boss was like, I want you to go check this out. They're bringing this thing into the agency, and I want to know what it's about. I fell in love with SharePoint, and I started studying at home, bought a server, virtualized it so I could have a SharePoint farm, and got certified. And then whenever the company I was with was kicked off, all the subs were kicked off the contract that I was on. And so I put my resume out there, and Dan, or not Dan, Federated IT company I was with, they're a great company too. They said, hey, got a job at Fort Meade if you're willing to put up with that commute. They had no idea where I was living. I'm like, twist my arm. And so that made for a change, and then I was able to do SharePoint full time, and it was wonderful. Working for that company, working for that particular organization, it was good. But I started having some heart issues, some stress issues, and my electrophysiologist, a cardiologist with master's in electrical engineering, he had said, your job is literally killing you. And it was the next morning when Booz Allen sent me an email saying, hey, got a front side SharePoint only job if you're interested. And I was like, what if the servers go down? Who's going to be handling that? You know, that's all a whole nother organization.
Nice.
Awesome.
Nice.
Sign me up.
Yep.
And so I've been dealing only with front end of SharePoint and, tenant administration and 365 and whatnot since then. So it is good times. I never regret any of the jobs I've held. They've always just been stepping stones to the next thing. And I've been fortunate that with most every single job, I've never really hated anyone on the team. Like I've got a great team now. The folks when I was at Dan Solutions were awesome, bar none awesome. So I've been very fortunate since I left the Army that I've really enjoyed all of my coworkers. It feels really good.
That is good. That is good. Oh, so what got you into helping organize for the user group? How'd they draft
necessity? Whenever I was with a smaller company, Accelerated IT, Accelerate. I'm afraid I'm going to mess up their name. Accelerate IT, I think. They're in Tyson's. Swetha and Nakia were having difficulty finding a place to host the user group, and they reached out to me, and I said, well, these guys have a big conference room and they're willing to let me have it here. And so I moved them over to that office, and we were there until I was able to get my clearance and stuff readjudicated, and that's when I went to work for Dan Solutions. And at that time, Dan had an office in the AUSA building in Arlington, and they said, yeah, you can do it here. And so I just, hey guys, let's move over here now. So Dan Solutions started to host us, and then Dan moved offices a couple times and just let us continue to go, and then COVID hit and whatnot.
Wow.
So it's not been a bad thing. It's been very fortunate because with Dan Solutions, they were very interested in kind of grooming some talent so that if they didn't have a clearance, we could train them and then bring them, and work, have like a pipeline, because they only have classified work. And that's how I brought in Joe. I'd met Joe at the client site, and we were smoking and stuff. I've given up, but he was like, I complained one day about SharePoint. And I'm like, I can help you out with that. And then he told me about his problem, and then he got more and more interested. And I'm like, hey, I got a user group over here. And then he met the company, and then opportunities sprang up, and he jumped. So
Wow.
it's been great for networking. I love the networking aspect of it.
So you've been in this career now for a while. What's something you've seen that you would want us to consider to change the way we do it? It could be anything, but if somebody came to you and said, Scott, you get to make the decision, and we're gonna do our best to follow it. What's a change you think we should make in the way we do something in IT today?
I think that the biggest problem I faced constantly, full trust developers who want to reinvent the wheel when Microsoft has already made the wheel. Microsoft gave us a great coloring book, and we can make awesome looking things as long as we're willing to color within the lines. Far too often, full stack developers like, oh, I want it to do this, and they don't know the SharePoint way to do it, or the M365 way now to do it. And so they try to code their own thing. And I'm like, you could just do it this way with click, 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 and save yourself 40 hours of coding. But they don't know the platform. So if I could get developers to really learn the platform before they try to write code against it, that would be my biggest wish in the world. I would say that Microsoft usually invents things to solve things I didn't know I had a problem with before I knew that I had a problem with it. So I'd like, wow, that's awesome. So that happens a lot. But yeah, there are some issues with some of the things. I'm in the middle of writing a blog post about all the things I hate about Planner and To Do. But every time I think I'm finished, I find another thing. So it might end up being like a part 1 through 18 kind of a post. So
that's interesting. As somebody who was a full stack developer, I completely understand what you're saying. And it annoyed me as a full stack developer. Why are we reinventing the wheel? Why aren't we creating libraries? Why aren't we leveraging existing code bases, right? Why do we have to write it all from scratch every single time?
When they're rewriting DLLs, I mean, we got a problem here.
That's a big problem. I would agree with you. So that's a good change. And we somehow need to fix that education pipeline.
Yeah, but the more that Microsoft has pushed the low code kind of thing with Power Apps and Power Automate, they're working toward it. But I don't think a lot of full stack developers understand, like, that's what they're encouraging,
right?
Is to do that.
So where do you see your stuff going? Where do you see the space going? Maybe the SharePoint space and the work you're doing there. Where are we headed?
More 365. I think the on-prem will eventually die out, and for good reason, right? I have far too many organizations still, especially within government, who are totally afraid that their stuff is less secure in the government cloud than in their own infrastructure. And yet Microsoft has about 10,000 people working cybersecurity and making certain that their stuff is tight. And you got 3 people who haven't learned the new IT certification since the 90s, right? And you think you're going to find the holes? I don't think so.
Well, that's like counting operations, right? The physical infrastructure that somebody's got to maintain versus something that you don't have to worry about.
Yeah. So I think that eventually people will get the clue and they'll go, okay, we have to go cloud. And I think that means that a lot of organizations need to change their business processes to fit. And that's not always, I think that as a consultant, I don't necessarily want to say, hey, you need to conform to the technology. I mean, it'd be better if I could, just help them with their business process and say, okay, this is where technology can supplement you. But oftentimes I just find broke ass procedures and processes. And so a lot of my job isn't really helping them with SharePoint, it's helping them with their process. And now you can, automate a couple things with SharePoint.
Yeah, we need to introduce you as Scott Brewster, business process engineer.
Yeah, a lot of my stuff has been business process re-engineering for a minute. Not so much in what I'm doing right now. My primary role with what I'm doing right now is training and governance. So I'm helping them write the policies and that kind of thing. So writing policies is an art in itself, because far too often it's written in passive voice. I used to teach English whenever I had a little side thing in the Army, and I was teaching as a second language. That's how I met my wife. But I see so much passive voice, and something must be done, but it never says by whom. And the vagueness of it leaves so much room up for interpretation that people, well, I thought that was on you. No, it's on you. And so
Right.
everyone's always able to get skirt around it. And then governance within the government is always hard, because the worst thing that can happen to someone who violates the governance is a dumb look. So I have a great government lead right now who's willing to put foot to butt, and that's a great thing that I haven't seen a whole lot of
No, that's
since
right.
I got out of the Army. At least with the Army units I had supported, right? Green suiters could, stomp in your mud hole and make you walk it dry if you're messing things up.
Right.
Don't see that too much in government, civilian side. So I'm very happy with my team right now.
Well, Scott, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast today. It's enlightening, and I feel your pain in many aspects, but I also feel your joy in the other aspects. So
Yeah,
it's good to talk with you, and I look forward to engaging you in the community.
thanks. Have a good one.